Hello, gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Agency Exposed.
Yeah.
Nice. That's such a nice intro, gentlemen.
Yeah,
that's a nice word.
Who walked in?
Yeah, exactly.
It's an old Three Stooges joke.
Yeah. This is
I
the only
know
place
that.
I'm ever
I just-
called.
yeah.
This is the only place I'm ever called a gentleman, so thank you.
Same. Glad to be called gentleman.
Yeah.
So today we are talking about
Drum roll,
Yeah.
please.
let's talk about digital ads and specifically conversion. Not only the optimization, but the purposes of why clients come to us and want to use digital ads, whether it's Google or Facebook. The whole difference between branding versus actual conversion.
Is it digital ads or all marketing?
Let's talk about it
I
all.
don't think it's digital ads. And the challenge that I always have is that clients want to participate in a full-scale marketing mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
From advertising to branding, from direct response and conversions. And the challenge that I always find is the clients actually will rate you, and actually all they really want is sales and conversions.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be able to have transparency and see what is actually creating sales. And it's kind of challenging because, there is a side of their mix that is creating awareness, increasing their brand awareness. And it might be something that even is a longer term play. But
You're saying they're not
judge
interested in
you
that right now.
But they say they want that.
Yeah.
But in the end, they judge you on how many leads that converted, right away. And that's the challenge, right? They're not in it for the long haul for a lot of, especially I see that a lot with more startups. Now, if you're a big brand and you have let's say you work with a brand manager, their focus is obviously going to be different. It's going to be awareness. It's going to be
Is that still the
testing
case,
awareness.
though? You're saying that in the past or recently, people don't care about brand awareness.
I don't think that our average clients don't care about 4 years down the road and what
I think that's true.
they care about today.
I wonder, I think the question is, why is that?
Yeah.
What's changed? We've supposedly been in this amazing economy over the last 10 years that now is kind of going into a bit of a recession. And if it's been like that for the last several years, you'd say it's only going to get more like that, right? More short-term focus than long-term focus. But what's changed? What changed in that period of time?
The internet, e-commerce.
Just e-commerce and the internet.
I think
is that my fault?
I think that, but I think the Amazon effect of people quicker, faster, immediate, customized. When you're in a world where you pulled out your phone, click a few buttons, and sometimes same day, but within 2 days you have what you want. It's really hard to go, oh, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that eyeballs where I can't measure my return on my investment immediately, that there's a big gulf between those two in a lot of people's mind. But
I talked to two clients over the last couple of weeks specifically about this. And one of them, our firm doesn't really specialize in PR, but one of them is working with a PR firm. And the firm, was creating some really nice thought leadership, a lot of articles, getting a lot of article plays. But in the end of the day, that's what they were sold, and that's a good thing for them, I think. I mean, it brings brand awareness. The thought leadership, especially in their industry, I think is really cool. But in the end of the day, the director of marketing was like, how many leads did we get from that? How many leads? And they're like, well, this isn't really to drive leads, even though it could drive leads. And they did attribute so they could actually somewhat measure what it was doing. We actually went in and kind of did a little bit more ties to it, really looked at the data stronger of where these leads were coming from. And the thing is, they're not coming from there. They're not, the leads aren't coming from there. But that's all the director of marketing cared about. Yet it wasn't what he was sold. Even on the conversation, the PR firm's like, this is branding and this is, thought leadership. This isn't something that's going to you're going to drive these leads like a bullet. It's something more long-term play. And I think even though he knew that, it was still, his expectation wasn't that. And the same thing with another potential client. I was kind of looking under the hood of what they were doing. They were trying to have us come in and kind of audit what they're doing. And they're doing so much and spending so much money in this area for their type of clients that I'm like, that you're spending all this money on branding, but all you care about is the response. And so, right. And I tell clients personally, if they don't care, if they're not going to be around in 2 years, if we don't get them X amount of leads and sales, we need to put a majority of our budget into that, right? Get customers that are sticky and provide great service for them. That's what's going to grow your business for the short term, right? The long term, you can invest in your brand and you can and build that, down the road. But if you're a new startup, how much should your mix be of stuff that won't have a direct response immediately, because in the end, I'm telling you, every client I've worked with just cares about that lead.
Even if they tell you up
Even
front.
if they tell you, that sounds good, we want to brand our company. They don't understand. They just want to brand so that they get immediate response.
It's such a, I think we've, as a business community, kind of led ourselves into this place. And I don't think it's a good one, right? This idea that if we don't get immediate sales, we're going to be out of business. That might be the reality for businesses in certain stages, right? Which I think you're right. Like if you're in a startup or survival stage, like you need to get immediate sales. That's how you stay alive. You don't care about 10 years now because if you don't stay alive in this year, next year, you're not going to be around 10 years from now. I think that category of business makes sense, but it's like every brand is sort of operating in that mentality and it may not be at the leadership level, but it's certainly, I definitely feel you. It's definitely it seems to be often at the marketing leadership level, the director of marketing, director of e-com, that kind of thing.
I mean, how many ads have you seen? Tesla ads.
Right.
I've not seen one Tesla ad.
They spend zero money on advertising marketing.
How many Ford ads have I seen? I see them all day long.
How many Apple ads do you see? Ford ads?
I see a lot of Apple ads.
A lot of Ford ads?
I see competitors.
Absolutely.
But I don't see Tesla. And that could be, there's many reasons why that is. The demand is still probably higher than what they can produce at times. So that, why would
they
you
were
run
also
ads?
one of the first in the markets with a product that was amazing. So therefore, they weren't competing. However, you're right. I think the strategy was brilliant. But it also, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot there. Like if you can afford to do that,
well, there was also a lot of time in their history where they almost went bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that I would have to challenge, I say this kind of out of frustration, like that.
Really? We would have never known.
Really? Well, clients just want the sale. That's all they care about. But the reality is we've seen it where clients focus too much on that, and 4 or 5 years down the road, they haven't done the proper job to build the foundation of their brand.
They turn the faucet off, and they don't have.
I have seen I'm in e-com. This happens all the time.
Yeah.
You could argue that Bob alluded to earlier, but I think e-commerce might be why people think this way.
It's your fault.
Yes, I wish that would be amazing.
All your fault.
All my fault. But the idea that someone else we can get an immediate sale, right? Oh man, that's like a drug, man. You just like continue to pursue that thing, and more now than ever, like this year, I have conversations with businesses. I see them. I could probably tell you 5 stories right now of this where they went gangbusters all the way through from like starting in 2018 through the golden age of e-commerce, through 2020 where things went nuts, still 2021, and now they're about to be bankrupt or pretty close to it. That is a very common situation. And the reason is, and I have had short-term thinking. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday where they were like, they had a certain product that they were selling, nice and gradually they were building a really nice business. 2020 came, they had this little product in their portfolio that happened to be useful in the 2020 era. It went nuts, and they shut everything else off. They just started doing that. Mm. And now it's gone. And now their conversation was literally like, yeah, we haven't done any of the stuff that for the 5 years prior had built our business in 2 years. So now we're kind of at zero again.
Yeah. It's like a drug. It really is.
It's a drug.
It's like I'm depending on the faucet, and as long as I pour money in and I've got it optimized and it's converting, and then you turn it off and like there's nothing else.
And the flip side of it is, or the additional side of it, this may not be the case with everyone, but often I see in e-commerce, no one looks at profit until it's too late. So focus on the sale.
Yeah, the profit's sometimes a lagging indicator. You're just looking at that later, and so you don't.
It often is something that because we're addicted to, wow, the sales are like where they're supposed to be. And, you talk to any person who runs ads, they're only talking about revenue. Who's talking about profit? I tie this all together because I believe that I do think we've created this situation, and the business community has created a situation where people are incentivized, even like marketing managers and those kind of things, for immediate sales. Mm-hmm. And so everything's been addicted to this immediate sales, which is why everyone's looking at ROAS as being the thing. And now ROAS is gone. Everyone's freaking out because you can't get that, right? And we've created this situation where you've got short-term thinking and you're addicted to it. You have to make it short-term because you haven't even thought about long-term. And your business model now has evolved to where it doesn't operate on long-term, like lifetime value, those kind of things. It operates only on immediate cash flow. And you've even seen, I think the FOMO effect has caused like, I even see bigger brands that have been around for 50 years doing traditional advertising the right way, like because of the FOMO thing, like have like been like, no, we need to have this philosophy too. And now they're in that philosophy too. And, I look at it from a business perspective, and I'm like, and I'm watching these businesses, like I like they're walking through our doors often, like looking for help, and you can see the bell curve, like it was like that, every single one like that, and it's all because they focused only on short term. I mean, that would be the primary thing. I would say the most common thing across the board, when a little bit of long term thinking, where it's like, let's build up, like brand awareness is one of those things. I wrote an article on metakick.com about this, but it's the business case for brand. And I think brand awareness to me, like, coming in, like get early on was like people like CEOs and, CFOs especially, and those type of people find it really hard to like invest in brand. It's like this ethereal thing that's nice to have. And like, I found, right? But when you realize that if you invest, so brand awareness, I think, is a bad name. I think we've labeled it probably wrong as marketers. We probably need to do a better job of marketing it. But it's more like building the only competitive advantage that you have. It's the only IP. It's the only real IP that you have is your brand, right? Like, so building into that is why Apple is Apple. It's why Tesla is why all these giant companies or not all of them, but certain companies who don't have to do a ton of marketing, can survive and thrive and continue to lead. It's because what do you think? I believe they've done it intentionally, but some may say it just happened. Whatever it is, they have this brand that has weight, and it's an asset to them, right? It's been built over time, and so they don't have to worry about someone knocking off their product, because it doesn't matter what kind of like trademarks you have, like people or patents and things, like people will knock off your products. But if you have a brand, they can't really knock off your brand. Like you see bootleg Apple watches and things, right? No one buys them.
All right.
But do you see bootleg apples? Like the brand Apple? Like doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. But you don't see that, right? And so it is. So okay, sorry to be. I'm gonna step off the soapbox for a second, but it would seem to me like we've got ourselves this place, and now we're at the place where we're addicted to all these pain meds. Now we have to or all these and now you have to kind of gradually pull them off and figure out which one's not going to kill you. Right. The typical stack of
iOS 15
medications.
Yeah, it's like Jenga. Really, it's like which one do you pull out? You need to pull some out, but you don't know which one's going to collapse you.
Yeah, I would say 3 things, and I'll start with I'll echo Ken's first statement is, as marketers, it's our fault because we need to have a real clear understanding and also measurement of what awareness is for the client. And what I mean by that is when they come in and we know that it's important, as we've all been saying, we need to show them a model for measuring value. And if we can't do that, how can we convince them that it's important? Because at the end of the day, they're in business to make money. So yes. We can go, now you can't really measure branding, but it's really important because of long term. You need to say, here's why it's important. Here's a couple of methods for measuring that. And here's the funnel and how the funnel works. And here's the timeline of what you can expect. So it might be top of the funnel. This is awareness. We're going to reach all these people. Here's the tools we're going to do to reach them. A certain percentage of them are then going to go into the middle of the funnel, which is an education process. So we're going to have, content, download, white papers, whatever it is, free course or whatever. And then down here is when we're going to push them hard for conversion. Now that whole process might take X amount of time. Here's how we're going to measure. And so the cost per lead, top of the funnel all the way down is this, right? So if you don't have all those things shored up pretty tight, it's really hard to go to sell a client, oh, well, branding is important because long-term people need to know about your name. So I think we need to do a better job of understanding that ourselves, putting together models. Secondly, I would say, explaining and having, this ties into the customer journey, a strong retargeting, remarketing strategy, and kind of looking at historically what the conversion rates on there, what the times are, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever you're measuring, last touch or impressions to conversions, to be able to provide that data for clients and show them, oh, okay, now I understand why that's a longer process. And then lastly, these are all ways to put strategies to branding. The last one I would say, and I preach this all the time, we've talked about it, is you've got to educate your client on the importance of organic traffic versus paid traffic and why organic long-term is a better decision. And ultimately it's about branding and marketing, but there's strategies behind that. Right. And there's conversion rates behind organic traffic, but it is a longer play. And if you do have a client that's too impatient that can't, there's nothing you can do about that. But I do think we need to do a better job as marketers because we have the tools today. And yes, there are immeasurables with branding. I will always say that with clients. However, there's enough measurables that I think we can do a better job at educating clients and getting them over that hump. But I think lifetime value is a big one. Like, I can't tell you, we talk about this, how many clients, it's amazing, don't know the lifetime value.
No clue.
Yeah. So if you have and again, what I'm talking about, if you're listening, it's if you look at your customer base and say over X amount of months, years, whatever, the average person spends $500 on my product or products, right? The initial to get in the door, the first purchase is $100, but I know over the next year, they're going to spend $500 or 2 years, they're going to spend $500. What you need to be measuring against is that $500, not that $100. And so that when you go to a client, you say, client, it might take us $150, $200, $250. What? that's more than what the conversion is. I'm not going to pay that. Whoa. Aren't you going to make $500 off this? So actually, that's a good investment to do it. And so we've got to do better jobs explaining that.
Well, yeah, it's not all. I mean, I would say yes, but it's also, I think business is just I think the business community. A lot of these businesses have forgotten some of the business model things.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this idea that you can make now. Look, it's great when you can make money on the initial sale, right? When you can acquire someone at a profit, that's you should be doing that. But traditionally, like businesses aren't able to do that. Like with the advent of the internet, like that's been a thing. But like traditionally, that's not always been the case. And so, I think just being aware of that awareness has kind of gone a little bit. And I'm not saying that should be accepted, but what I don't see often is I don't see the business model built out to where you understand, okay, if I acquire someone at this price, there is this lifetime value. And I think that's where maybe we can help build that in. And the skill of like measuring lifetime value is not an easy one. I think for a lot of people, it gets confused in the idea of lifetime. It's not actually lifetime. It's in different time frames, like you mentioned. And we measure lifetime value at certain intervals that are critical intervals. Like what is it 30 days from the purchase? What is it 100 days from the purchase? What is it a year, et cetera, out?
And the challenge I would have to say is that a lot of companies that are only a year old, they don't know that. They don't know
But they should have an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah. They should have an idea, but some don't. And I think the challenge with like our size agency is that we deal with organizations that are they're driven by sales and the sales group. Mm-hmm. And so marketing works for the sales group. So they have a responsibility. All the sales department does is care about their sales. And so they're pushing on marketing to saying the money we're spending, how many sales is it getting right away? And so the person who's driving internally the marketing may really respect the branding side, but nobody else cares about that except him or her. And so they're not, there's nobody on their side when it comes to like 2 years down the road, let's create a strong brand. Unless the CEO and some of the top, C-level folks are really, if they come from that experience, they're a lot more in tune to that. But if they don't, then they're just really care about immediate sales. And, it's selling. You got to, as an agency, you have to know for that client, what is going to make them successful. And you have to get into their business. Like you have to go, how many do you need to sell? Otherwise you're going to go out of business. Because I want to keep you in business first. If the goal is just for them to survive for the first 2 years, and then after that, the goal is to build a strong brand. After 2 years, after they're more healthy and they've got a product, they've learned and they've grown, maybe that's the strategy for them. And that's okay.
Well, you've got to be 3/4 marketer and 1/4 business analyst today. Yeah. If you're going to do the things that we're talking about, like to have that conversation of, do you know your lifetime value? And they're like, well, we don't. You've got to be able to say, hey, do you want us to help you with that? Because I think it's really important. Can you give us your customer data for the last 2 years? And you've got to be willing to go that far.
You have to know your attrition rate. Right. You have to know your lifetime values. Another thing, though, too, is sometimes it's challenging. Is you might work with a client who has established brand, and what they do is they're losing it because the person in charge or something just is more lead focused and not really caring about that brand. And you've got something really special that you see year by year you're losing, right? And this brand equity that has been developed. And I think, that's always, we've run into that before where a new marketing director comes in and they're just all about, conversions and not as much concerned about the brand and doing things that will keep their equity. And we see they're losing sometimes.
I think the other thing is like, I kind of like defining maybe a little bit of what we mean by brand. And in my world, it's like, if the CEO doesn't believe in it, then I think there's a fundamental problem at the business level, because you can't, like, the brand is not like blog posts and stuff, right? It's not the logo and all that. It's really like there has to be some heart in the organization of like why they do what they do.
Right.
It's the why behind it. And if the CEO doesn't have that, then I think it's one of those kind of like soul. I ventured to, like, excuse me for saying, like, it's like can be a soulless organization, right? Because it's just the truth. Like, if there's no one that has any connection to why, they don't really have a brand. They have a shell of a brand, and that may be why they don't believe in building a brand, because they don't have a why behind it. Because, like, we all know, like, why do you do what you do? To make money. Like, that's never going to work. The business must make money, but the why can't be to make money, because, as ironic as it is, like, if a why is make money, then the business will not make money, right? So
it has to be a bigger purpose.
So sometimes, like, there has to be this, and if it's not there, it doesn't mean it can't be there. It just may not be. They may not be aware to it, and like the idea of like, well, how do we find the purpose, like the why, and the personality of this thing, and that we can actually develop? Because once you do that, I've found that for people that may not be aware that is kind of the core of the brand, like when you do that, they can kind of attach to building that a little bit more. It's not like, we don't have to spend money doing weird stuff. It's really just reinforcing those values, like in every touch point. Even you could even argue, like, without even spending a bunch of time and effort doing things that don't have a return. Like my point is like, even in the direct response zone, you can be building your brand. But that's if that core's not there, then it's really hard to do it to begin with.
Yeah, it's really important. I think talking about branding and awareness with clients is changed. And like you said, 10 years ago, you could have this conversation. And I think it was, if you go back and watch Mad Men, which is a great series, all marketers should watch it. That's what they did pretty much, is they would they would pound and drill a product into the consumer's mind until they had no other choice of when they wanted to buy that brand of cigarettes or that toaster or whatever. There was only one choice that they would think of. And, we joke and laugh, maybe because we're old guys, and me and Brad, it's like, that's never changed, right? That people's choices have, and their immediate satisfaction. But still, there are certain brands that give me and you feelings immediately when we think of them and we look at them.
I have some, it's weird because from the invent of digital marketing and high level of transparency of your data and tracking, most of today's marketers, they say they do branding. They may do YouTube videos, blah, blah, blah. But they don't ever test branding the way we used to test it, or even put that into the strategy. So back in the day, and I'm going to date myself, when most of our efforts were branding, I would say 70% and 30% direct response, right? Trying to get people to buy into incentives and
why? And I'll just like, why is that? That's because, and I think this is really valuable. Just even as I'm listening to it, to think about on your everyday, it's because there was no internet, there was no phone in someone's hand.
Correct.
So what Facebook does is like it shortcuts you having to remember the brand, and it says, hey, here's a brand that does this thing, right? That's what Facebook does. But in the past, and this is true now, and it will be true into the future, the branding helps the person remember it and think about it when they need it.
To get a 7x
so Facebook's the crutch, and that's why it's working. But if you could just, but that won't always be there.
To get a 7x frequency on traditional media back in the day was very expensive. You had to buy 30-second commercials and do radio and do a billboard and all that stuff, right? Just to get 7x frequency. And so you got to pound the market in market by market. But what we used to do, and we don't really do this anymore. And I think it's because of the expense of it, especially with some of the larger brands that I've worked on, is before we did a campaign, we would do a public polling. we would find out
Yeah.
top of mind brands that were top of mind in certain markets, and we would go back to that market. You know, you used to go to the mall and people would ask, "Can I ask you a questionnaire? Can you take a questionnaire for me? You know, get a free coupon to whatever." And so they would, you would get a lot of data of your brand awareness within specific, market to market, and you would do it before and after you run campaigns, and whatever the messages were, you would understand brand awareness, and there was a lot more energy put into that to prove that the brand awareness had increased in certain areas, and that the sentiment increased, or other brands diminished. And so most marketers today, I don't think do that. They think of, I'll just do, we'll do a YouTube campaign and put a bunch of YouTube commercials together and all this stuff. But they can see, oh yeah, we got this many views, right? Well, that's great. You got this many views, but did you actually impact somebody's ability to recall you, to recall your messages? You don't know that until you start to really take a look at the population and start to get data from the population.
I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, so we'll go back in a couple of years. I have a feeling that we're going to go back to that to some degree. I think as privacy legislation and a lot of the tracking is being turned off, I think people are going to go back full circle and say, oh, maybe we need to do things a little differently, and we need to think about the days of getting into people's minds and measuring that and tracking that somehow, because I do think it's really important. And I've always believed good business and marketing principles are universal and timeless, because platforms will come and go. They really will. They always will. But to your point, I was sitting here thinking, when we were growing up, the only way we would find out about and make a decision on some cool gadget or a new band or a movie or something was either through a magazine, television ad, or maybe radio, right? So that's how we would find out. Like, we'd be in our Camaro in high school, and we'd have the radio on, and we're like, hey, they're coming to the Sportatorium on the 5th, let's go to the record store and buy tickets to go see our favorite band, right?
Yeah.
Or we'd be reading our favorite comic book or fan magazine, and we'd be like, oh, that new gadget's out, I want that toy, or whatever it may be. But that was traditional branding, right? It was just like a continual mention and putting in the mind of the target consumer, to where eventually they had no choice but to act on that. And that, again, takes patience and time. But I think we're going to be returning to that to some degree.
I think you said it, the recall is what's important here.
Yes.
So and I just want to kind of maybe bottom line it for everyone. It's not that the old days are better than new days or whatever.
Right.
I think it's the fact that we have to realize I don't think we realize what's happening when we're doing direct response, especially digital marketing. We're substituting the recall ability for the ad.
For impressions.
And so that works great as long as that works. As long as that is the thing that is able to be substituted, as long as the user's using it and you can get in front of people with that. As soon as what's happening now, as soon as privacy happens, as soon as the Facebook and other platforms get crowded, as soon as costs become prohibitive, as soon as people stop using the platforms, then they're using other things for that recall. And let's remember that the best recall is the brain. I think that's the kind of case for making sure your brand is top of mind and has things and triggers and a tagline. And the reason a jingle works is because people can remember melodies, recall better than words.
You know what's and I think we should probably.
So anyway,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just bottom line it, however it's done. I think being aware that that's what's happening, and so do that as much as you can, but also hedge that with, I believe in taglines, and things like that, because the more you can do that and more you can put that in someone's head is when they think of something, they think of you. That is valuable, and that's what you're trying to do.
I mean, I can't tell you how I have a lot of jingles from the 80s that I still remember. It's like
how many recent ones?
None, probably.
Right? Because we've stopped doing that.
Yeah.
Mostly because of other things being useful, and that's fine. But maybe that's still important.
As I sit here and listen to all this and obviously participate, I think it keeps driving home what you might be saying, Brad, and what we might all be frustrated with is we've lost the art, or we have forgotten, of really, really good storytelling and really, really good creative, because that's what's recalled, right?
Yes.
And I think we've bought the lie, and it's not a total lie, and I'm guilty of this, is the lie. Here's the lie. People's attention spans have gone down to a second, and people swipe, and you've got to convert them and get their attention in that. And while I think there's some truth to that, I think I can tell you and you can go today and see some very, 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 very successful brands that are built on long attention spans. How many people that would swipe and not pay attention to your ad that you don't put a lot of, honestly, if we're honestly, time and effort to, will then go and binge watch 5 hours of Stranger Things tonight? Now, don't tell me people's attention spans are not good. Why are they binging that? Because it's good story, it's entertaining, and it's engaging. And I think what we're sitting here is we're longing for the days of when we could really put the time and effort and really get really good creative and story, so that recall is that brand gives me a feeling, it gives me an emotion. And again, I think that's what I think is at the heart of this personally, is because our clients don't get branding is because no one is showing them anything that's really good and worth it to like blow their head off and go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I want people to feel that.
And it's a bit of a vicious cycle, because then that means like, there's no value in it. And so people don't want to spend even consider it. Or maybe that happens, right? That's not maybe everybody. Who's proven that otherwise and this is old now, but like the Harmon Brothers, and all their long form video ads.
People will sit there and watch them.
People will sit and watch them. And now everyone is starting to do that. And that's probably a good thing. It's probably kind of like gotten back to some of those things that work. And
but you cut corners till it's not as good anymore.
Yeah. And then that kind of happens. And that's part of like human nature, right? We're looking for shortcuts, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, let's remember, when we look for shortcuts and they stop working, we forget what was actually working when we were pursuing that shortcut.
Right.
Right. And that is the thing that we kind of have to get back to. When numbers are declining, when direct response is not working the way it was, we have to get back to what is it actually doing in the first place, and how do we do that?
Yes.
Good, gentlemen. This is a good discussion.
All right.
Until next time, please like and review. It really helps. So at the end of this, press pause and give us a star. Tell us what you like, even what you don't like. We want to hear from you.
Not just 1 star.
Yeah, 5 stars,
Give
please.
us 5 stars.
And if not, don't. All right, guys. Until next time.
Enjoy it.
See ya.
See ya. Bye.